Why can't I ever get a vehicle in Battlefield 2042? What is going on with vehicle balance? Why are vehicles so overpowered? These are questions I hear all the time, and in the most recent Battlefield briefing, senior producer Ryan MacArthur expressed that, quote, "the balance is getting to a place where we're quite happy with it." Personally, I have to disagree with that statement. The balance is definitely better than it was, but I think it's far from being in its final state. Now, there's always been two different sides to this argument in Battlefield. When you're playing as infantry, it's absolutely no fun to get demolished by vehicle after vehicle and feel like you're powerless against them. On the other hand, it's also no fun never being able to actually spawn in a vehicle or have it feel too weak to do any damage with, and in my opinion, that is currently the situation. The decision DICE have made is to get rid of most of the game's vehicles, only leaving behind a fraction of what we've seen in previous Battlefield games, which has put them in the embarrassing position of releasing two brand new helicopters that everybody wants to try out, but you can never actually get one without waiting on the spawn screen and spamming away. So let's dive a bit deeper into some of the pieces of the vehicle versus infantry balance in Battlefield as a whole, why players are getting annoyed with vehicles, and how DICE can potentially fix some of these problems. Designing Battlefield's vehicle versus infantry gameplay is and always has been a fine balance. Many of Battlefield 2042's core design decisions, such as the specialists, have upset that fine balance. In previous games, you would play as one of four classes, and roughly 1/4 to perhaps a third of your team played as the engineer class. The engineer class were specialised in taking down vehicles and had access to plenty of different launchers, with a general focus on the harder the gameplay mechanic, the more powerful it was. A great example of this is taking two lock-on missile hits to take down a jet or a helicopter, but a harder to use weapon like an RPG or a SRAW wire-guided rocket would one-shot almost every flying vehicle. Therefore, playing as an engineer felt powerful and quite rewarding on an individual level. In Battlefield 2042, the specialist system now means that potentially every player, regardless of what role they're fulfilling, whether that be a sniper, a medic, or anything in between, has the ability to carry lock-on anti-air missiles or an M5 launcher. This problem is of course made exponentially worse by the doubling of the player count from 64 to 128 players. Now, the result of this has been to make these weapons weaker. It no longer takes two lock-on missiles to take down a helicopter, especially not with the addition of the repair mechanic that every vehicle in the game now has. The worst representation of this is with the transport helicopters, sometimes taking 4 or 5 missiles to put down, and that's without two passengers in there constantly repairing. Needless to say, playing as an anti-air role feels way less rewarding than it previously did, and most players simply give up trying to take down those air vehicles, and instead they try to fight it out inside a building and stay out of their way altogether. Now, couple this with the bad map design and the lack of cover, and you can see and understand why infantry players feel helpless against enemy aircraft. Okay, so the next piece of this puzzle is the vehicle versus vehicle balance. Let's take a look at a game that handled this fantastically, Battlefield 4. In this game, every single vehicle had a counter. The attack jets and the attack helicopter were definitely an infantry player's worst nightmare, but get a good pilot in your team's stealth jet and he'll make short work of them. The stealth jet was specifically designed to be faster and more agile than the attack jet, and also had a higher flight ceiling than the helicopters, meaning they could make top-down attacks on the helis where they are the weakest. In turn, attack helicopters and attack jets were the hard counter to tanks on the ground. Tanks helped counter enemy tanks and pushed onto flags with their infantry as support, and scout helicopters were fast transportation for backcapping enemy flags and could get onto an objective behind enemy lines and really put some pressure on the infantry that were in cover. These were the clear roles that each individual vehicle had in that game, and having all of these vehicles was also the reason you couldn't simply farm infantry. Getting too greedy in that attack helicopter, that stealth jet will come and put you in your place. As an infantry soldier in that game, I have fond memories of looking up in the sky and seeing the air vehicles just battling it out amongst themselves. Remember the Battlefield 2042 trailer where you've got two attack helis chasing each other and the two jets having a dogfight with the Rondazook scene and all that stuff? That's what Battlefield 4 is actually like. Now you only need to look at a map like Siege of Shanghai to find a perfect example of when this vehicle balance is overlooked. On that map, the attack helicopter's only real counter is the enemy attack heli. So if you're better than him, once you kill him, you're just going to have an easy time farming crops all day long. Hence why that map is the favourite above all maps for attack helicopter pilots. Now in Battlefield 2042, there is one major difference. You can pick whatever vehicle you want from a pool of vehicles. This has been the case since Battlefield 1, and I suppose what they were going for is more player freedom, more player agency as they like to call it, just like with the specialist system we now all love so very, very much, but opening up these vehicle spawns to player choice causes huge imbalances in the gameplay. When Battlefield 2042 released, there was, I think, 3 attack vehicles and around 4 transports per team. It doesn't take a genius to see that if your team decide to spawn, let's say 3 jets with air-to-ground missiles, the enemy team's tanks are going to have a miserable time. They won't stand a chance because a jet with AGMs is the hard counter to a tank, and just like that, the balance is thrown out of whack. We all saw what happened when one team spawned 4 Nightbirds and made infantry players' lives hell. This kind of thing cannot happen if you have set spawns for each vehicle. Another benefit of such a system is that it allows you to individually balance the available vehicles on a map-by-map basis. Not every Battlefield 4 map, for example, had every single vehicle on it. There were plenty of mid-sized maps that had no jets and attack helis, some of them even had no air vehicles at all. Now this is one of the biggest reasons that Battlefield 2042 cannot sustain the same number of vehicles. DICE were forced to reduce the overall number of vehicles due to their bad gameplay design. It really is as simple as that. So now the new situation is this. You die to a Nightbird with overpowered rocket pods, you try to spawn in a jet to counter him, but there's only one air vehicle spawn, right? So if somebody else is in a Nightbird or an attack heli, or more likely the new stealth heli, then there's really nothing you can do. Even if you decide to tough it out and wait on the spawn screen, more likely than not, somebody else will be doing the same thing, and if they have a lower ping than you, they'll get the vehicle spawn before you do. So you think, okay, I'm going to spawn in with an AA launcher to take him down, but nobody else on your team bothers because they know it'll be easily avoided and they feel like they're just wasting their time and not having much fun. That's pretty much the situation right now, and I really think DICE need to completely overhaul the spawn system and take a look at a game like Battlefield 4 that actually worked. Okay, so let's talk about the big one here, in my opinion. The big piece of the vehicle balance problem, and that is that vehicle weapons need to be looked at in a big way. So far we've heard from DICE that they're looking into map design, they're doing a specialist rework, but we haven't heard anything about any sort of a vehicle tuning pass. Okay, yeah, they took the Nightbirds on the bolts and they stuck them into the attack category and got rid of 75% of all vehicles. They literally chose the easiest, laziest way, and people stood up and applauded them for it. I mean, call me old-fashioned, but in my opinion, removing an entire core gameplay loop is not good balancing work. And you can see the results of this fine balancing work by DICE, by how overpowered the transport helicopters, especially the Russian one, have become. The main issue is that they're simply too tanky. They were made this tanky to begin with because DICE were accounting for 128 players, all having AA launchers, jets flying everywhere, locking them on, enemy helis, etc. They knew that if the transports weren't a bit tanky, that they wouldn't stand a chance. But now that they've removed practically all of the vehicle counters, what we're left with is infantry and transport helis. Transport helis that take about 5 AA missiles, TV missiles, you name it, to destroy. If they have 2 passengers repairing, it's going to take even more missiles. There are no jets going to pester them, there are no helis locking onto them, they practically have free reign of the skies now. And this was an incredible oversight by DICE. Let's remember where the trouble actually lies though. The Nightbird is not overpowered, okay. The rocket pods are overpowered. I mean, they are overpowered in every single way. Like, their splash damage is too high, the splash range is too high, they fire too fast, they reload too fast, there's too many of them in a salvo. You know, they could nerf any one of these aspects easily, and they would see an improvement. This is one of the best representations of DICE's approach to vehicles in Battlefield 2042. We see the miniguns, the weapon that is harder to aim with, is less effective than the weapon that is much more forgiving with massive splash damage. So why would you use anything but the rocket pods if it's the easiest weapon available and the most effective? Again, in Battlefield 4, weapons were much harder to use. You could get into a vehicle and score a couple of kills, sure, but it took some real skill and game knowledge to stay alive for a long time and get a lot of kills. In fact, players who were able to do that actually had, some level of admiration from the community because people knew how hard it was to achieve. In Battlefield 2042, anybody can hop into a Nightbird, rain down rocket pods, and watch the skulls stack up. It really is that easy, so much so that getting kills in the Nightbird is the least satisfying vehicle experience I've ever had. It really is child's play. You can see they took a similar direction with the jets too. Every secondary weapon available for the jet is a lock-on weapon that requires 0 skill, and the only weapon you have to aim with, the main cannons, has such terrible spread that even if you do stay on target, you probably won't hit anything anyway. So why even bother? So to summarize here, in the case of the Nightbirds, I really think DICE need to nerf the rocket pods and make them worse than the cannons when used properly. Sure, you'll still get the odd pro that has hundreds of hours in the Nightbird who can still kill you with the cannons, but the difference is that 9 out of 10 Nightbirds will be an average player who won't be quite as effective, who will be more susceptible to being taken out, which will make equipping that AA launcher feel more worthwhile. In short, easy to use weapons should be less effective and more high skill weapons should be more effective. If DICE would balance all the vehicles this way, that would allow us to have more vehicles, allow players to enjoy that gameplay loop once again without them becoming too overpowered. Now, as a final note here, I did want to mention one final issue that has been prevalent in every Battlefield game, really, and this is infantry's willingness to actually switch roles to take out vehicles. Now, you guys know me, I like to play in vehicles. I've always been a vehicle player, but I also play infantry, of course, even more so now than ever with the lack of vehicles. But one of my favourite things to do is swatting that pesky Nightbird out of the sky that's just been alive for way too long. Especially with the new TV missile, that is definitely a step in the right direction. It one-shots jets, it one-shots Nightbirds, and it's a high skill, high reward weapon. But I know there are many infantry players out there who don't like to have to change their loadout to deal with an enemy heli or an enemy jet, and the truth is that unless enough players switch their loadouts, you will get dominated by vehicles, and this has always been the case in Battlefield. That is the nature of a sandbox game. Sometimes the enemy team's vehicle users aren't very good and the vehicles aren't really a nuisance. Other times you've got somebody like me, for example, to contend with who is half decent, and you need to react to that. And I really think that that's what makes Battlefield special. Every time you spawn in, you look at the map and the spawn point and assess the situation. Is there a tank on the ground? Is there a heli flying around there? Should I switch to an AA launcher or an M5 launcher? Should I pick Liz? I think that if more players did that and thought that way, they'd have a lot less trouble with vehicles. I suspect that way too many players never change up their loadout and instead spawn onto a flag with 2 helis flying around it with nothing more than a med kit and then get annoyed that they died. Now, DICE really need to do a better job communicating that to players as well as rewarding players for that. something that the specialist system has blurred the lines between and made it very unclear. But one thing seems clear to me: the more player choice DICE give us, the worse the gameplay experience is becoming. In Battlefield 1, they opened up the vehicle spawns to allow you to choose whatever vehicle you wanted, and vehicle balance has been in shambles ever since then. Now in Battlefield 2042, you can take whatever gadget you want and play the way you want, which has resulted in too few engineer type players most of the time. Then you've got the plus system to let you change attachments on the fly, although admittedly I do kinda like this one. The worry is though, the more freedom we get, the more homogenized, the more less unique everything becomes. While setting rules doesn't really sound very fun, these are the very things that provide a balanced gameplay experience, and the more of them we lose, the less I feel like I'm playing Battlefield. Now obviously I don't really have any hope that DICE are going to watch this video and completely overhaul Battlefield 2042. I know they're not going to add a ton of vehicles. I know they probably can't even be bothered to do a proper vehicle balance pass and get things the way they should be. I know they're not going to get rid of specialists and put in a class system that will lead to better vehicle infantry balance. So I guess you could say, why am I even bothering to make this video? Well, I still think it's valid feedback, and hopefully DICE are looking at games like Battlefield 4, and hopefully at feedback like this when they make the next Battlefield title. Right, I'm going to leave it there for today, guys. Let me know your thoughts down below on this. You know, what is your stance on vehicles? Do you actively try to take down vehicles? Do you like to play in vehicles and are fed up not getting any spawns? Whatever your stance, comment down below and let's discuss it. Thank you for watching the video, and I'll talk to you in the next one.